If you want to change society, you don't start with adults. You start with children, you start with schools, and you start with the institutions that influence how young people understand themselves, their families, their country, and the world around them. And in many respects, I think the political left have understood this reality for generations.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming. And Clare Rowe, please come to the microphone.
Thank you very much, Scott. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's so lovely to be here. It is my first time at a Brisbane IPA event. I'm usually at the Sydney events, so it's really lovely to see new members, meet new members. Is that a clap just for being in Brizzy? Woo, go Brizzy. It's really lovely to be here. Yes, some of you may have heard me barking on about issues with child psychology and mental health on Sky News and columns in News Corp and the Financial Review now for quite a while, and I was just thrilled when the IPA approached me 18 months ago and gave me the opportunity to have a bigger platform, really to speak about the expertise that I was already trying to speak about, but just to bring it to the forefront and give me the opportunity to do some research in this area. So I said to someone today as I met them outside that I really feel like I've found my tribe, and love coming down to Melbourne to visit the offices at the IPA, and just first time I was there walking in thinking, there's an Australian flag on the desk, like this is amazing, just very comfortable. So it's been lovely. I'm not going to go into too much detail tonight about my research, but there is a QR code on the flyers there on your chairs. So I would love for you to read the papers I've put out and contact me with questions or debate me or raise concerns that you may have seen with your own children and grandchildren. But I'm going to touch on that, but I wanted to talk generally also tonight about what I'm seeing as I'm very honoured to be able to assist in launching this book from Bella. And of course, many of you know that Bella and I have been colleagues through the IPA, but we come at these issues from different disciplines. Bella is an education researcher and I'm a psychologist, and Bella spends her time asking what children are being taught, and I ask, what is it doing to them? And over the past few years, I've been increasingly convinced that these two questions can no longer be separated, because education, unfortunately, is never just about information. It's about influence, and it's about values, and it's about who gets to shape the next generation. And perhaps nowhere is that battle more important than in childhood. And I think as a psychologist, one of the things I have increasingly come to appreciate is that childhood is not just a developmental stage of life. It is really a strategic terrain. It is, the people who get to shape children do ultimately shape our future for this country. And I think the great political and cultural movements of history have always understood this. If you want to change society, you don't start with adults. You start with children, you start with schools. And you start with the institutions that influence how young people understand themselves, their families, their country, and the world around them. And in many respects, I think the political left have understood this reality for generations. Whether that is the student movement of the 1960s or identity politics or climate activism or gender ideology, there has been a consistent recognition that cultural change is achieved by shaping the beliefs of children. Far easier to get to the children than adults. And I think conservatives, by contrast, have traditionally taken a different view. I know I have. We have tended to believe that childhood should be protected from politics. Children should be allowed to develop. We think that we should shield them. That schools, God forbid it, should just transmit knowledge. That parents should be the primary moral authority in a child's life. And these are instincts I share, that families, not governments, not bureaucracies, should be responsible for raising their children. But I think that perhaps these instincts have also made us quite complacent. Because while many conservatives were busy defending free markets and individual liberties and limited government, there have been others who have steadily marched through our institutions to shape childhood right under our noses. And for decades, we have assumed that parents would naturally remain the central figure in their children's lives, but increasingly we can no longer assume that. And I think that matters. It matters certainly in developmental psychology. And psychology teaches us something very simple that we forget all the time. Children are not miniature adults. They are not political actors. They are not activists. They should not be vessels through which adults pursue social and cultural and political objectives. They are developing human beings and their cognitive capacities are still forming, which I guess ironically is the very reason that they are targeted by the radical left to indoctrinate very, very early. And yet increasingly, particularly through my research here with climate anxiety, we are asking them to carry burdens that previous generations of children would never have been expected to carry. And this has just become abundantly clear in my work through the IPA. And I think when I began this project, here it is. Thanks, Scott. There it is. When I began this project, I thought I was studying anxiety. And what I have realised is I am studying and researching something much bigger. I am researching what happens when adult concerns become children's concerns, and when children are charged with being responsible for solving those problems that they neither created or understand. And when children start questioning and turning against their parents' guidance in favour for what they are being fed at school. And, most alarmingly, when they are distressed, that distress is now often treated as evidence of awareness, as evidence that they care, that they're engaged. It's a moral virtue. And I don't think it takes a psychologist here to know that emotional distress is not something we should celebrate in our children. Because children need hope, and they need security, and they need faith that the adults around them are capable of managing these problems. And quite frankly, they just need to learn to read and write. And increasingly, I see children, and these aren't 15-year-old kind of goth-looking teenagers, questioning the world. These are very young 7, 8-year-olds who are encouraged to think about themselves only through the lens of ideology and diagnosis and grievance and oppression before they have had the chance to simply develop or learn to tie their shoelaces. And when I meet with parents, they are confused, they're uncertain, they feel like they are losing confidence in their own instincts to parent. They sense something has changed, but they struggle to describe it. And most of all, they do not have a clue what is being taught to their child at school. One parent I know I was talking to this week only recently found out the extent of it, and they found out the extent through stealth. After months of approaching their child's school and wanting reassurance that they would not be teaching their child a radical gender ideology, and reassurance was given that they're not teaching that, their child returned home one day talking about pronouns. She asked the child to bring home their health workbook. He wasn't allowed by the teachers. So she managed to get him to smuggle it out of the classroom, get it to the toilets where he took photos of the pages to bring back and show his mother the completely unscientific, dangerous gender ideology that filled the weekly lessons of these 13-year-olds. And essentially, this is why Bella's book matters, because before parents can respond, they need to understand what is happening. The greatest threat, I think, to parental authority in our children is not malice, it is actually just complacency. So we have to be informed first to be engaged. And we must understand what is happening, because no institution will ever love a child as much as their parents do. And no curriculum can replace a family, and no expert, even myself, can replace a parent. And that is why I hope people do more than simply read this book. I know I am. I'm hoping you share it. Buy copies for your spouse and your children and your grandchildren and teachers and coaches and friends, and for anyone who plays a role in shaping the lives of young people, and I think we all do. Because I think awareness is where this change is going to start. And the future will really will be determined by a next generation, not just policy conversations and elections. So the central question really is not simply what our children is learning, but who gets to shape them. And I think that Bella has written a very courageous book, but more than that, I think she has written a very necessary book, very necessary. And so I hope it is brought up and spread far and wide. I will be dropping off a box of them to my children's school. I'm ordering a box and I will just be delivering it on the front doorstep. And to anyone I know, everyone this Christmas is getting a copy. And I'm sure you don't want to hear from me any further. So with that note, I'm going to leave it so that you can hear from the main person you've come to hear from. Thank you very much.
We'll give Bella a moment to compose her thoughts, because I've described Bella as brave, and that doesn't really say the half of it. It is what Bella has had to do over many years. Is to speak out, has been brave, and to possibly the only person outside of the bureaucracy in Australia to read the entire national curriculum. That is a sacrifice for the greater good, and we might come back to that. But I'll give you a second to compose yourself. Now, Claire, you've talked about some of the content, but let's just talk about the Childhood Climate Anxiety Project. One of our fears when we started is that we might be toiling away in obscurity there for a while. But almost immediately, when you started publishing, and this report is your second report, it's struck a nerve, it seems. And within, a couple of weeks of the most recent publication, we had this astounding open letter from the great and the good, from Zali Steggall down, who I had hitherto not been aware was an expert in childhood psychology. And clearly, one of the mottos that we have at the IPA is that when you're taking flack, you know you're over the target. But Claire, can you tell us about that experience? Because, and the report was, of course, a call to your own profession as much as anything.
Yeah. So the first report that I did, this project, working alongside Colleen Harkin at the IPA, and the first report was really looking into the curriculum, and that was a huge eye opener for me. I had no idea the extent of these third-party providers who are supplying the worksheets to young children. And I was just shocked at the imagery on the videos that they're given of burning forests with operatic, dramatic music over the top, and these kind of words that come out at you saying there is no planet B, and it's quite, just to watch it as an adult, you're quite shaken, and to think that this was for year one. And one of the problems, and sidestep, but one of the problems with this, and I have an 8 and 9-year-old, is that I'm always asking as parents, what did you do at school today? Nothing. How was school? Good. That's the extent of it. So it's very hard to know until problems start occurring. So that was the first paper. But the second paper was really looking at representative bodies in the mental health profession, such as the Australian Psychological Society, and their stance. And their stance with climate anxiety, particularly with young children, is that suddenly we are encouraged to depart from decades of good evidence of how we treat anxiety through things like cognitive behavioural therapy. And the techniques of that, of course, are challenging some of the cognitions that you have, the thoughts and the catastrophizing thoughts that you have, and to challenge some of that and to steer people to manage that anxiety, and essentially to help parents reassure kids, no, we're not supposed to do that. This, however, with climate anxiety, we're encouraged to lean in and validate their concerns as real and a valid response to something that's happening in their environment. And I was questioning that in the paper, very critical, to say, well, why is that anxiety presentation different from every other anxiety presentation, regardless of the cause of the distress? And so, yes, within under 2 weeks of publishing that IPA paper, we had an open public letter, not only with 300 individual signatories against that research, but what shocked me was groups like the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatry, the Australian College of General Practitioners, and of course the usual suspects like the Black Dog Institute and Origin and mental health organisations like that. Very interesting, their stance, their argument that they've taken. I give it to them, it was very creative. They're now saying that they don't have climate anxiety. They just have valid distress. They've just called it something different. And so Clare Rowe is now the one over-pathologising children, which just shocked me, because if anyone of you watched me on Sky, I'm harping on about how we over-pathologise and diagnose and label children all the time. And now I'm being gaslit by these organisations to say, you're the one over-pathologising, they don't have anxiety, and they just need to go home and recycle a bit more and they'll feel a bit better.
Yeah, and it's worth having a look. It is amazing, but Bella, these are the language games that the left plays, and they literally used in the Parisian nonsense machine that Roger Scruton called it. Language games were huge things, and they love to do this. So they can invent climate anxiety when it suits them, and then when it doesn't suit them, they'll disavow it and create new terms. And you've been right through this, of course. Like anti-racism would be just one of the examples that you've seen in the way they try and frame it and undermine actual language.
The whole system is based on the language experiment. This is why it's taken parents so long to catch up with what's going on, because of course they never label what they're doing accurately. They're never going to call the classes that so anti-racism, for example, to take anti-racism as you mentioned, it's got nothing to do with being anti-racist. It's actually a very racist ideology which forces people to look at the whole world through the lens of race, but it racializes every interaction, and it obviously puts people into categories of oppressed and oppressor, but they will still call it anti-racist, even though it's the opposite. Same with sustainability in the cross-curriculum priority. It's not sustainability, it's climate change alarmism. Again, they call it history. It's not, it's politics, it's contemporary politics. The respect for relationships is the most obvious example, got nothing to do with respect, it's got nothing to do with relationships, it's all about radical gender ideology and queer theory. So this is why I wanted to write the book, so that parents would recognize, as I mentioned, the code and the language. If they really called it what it was, there would be mass rebellions in the street, but they have to be, they're clever, they're not going to really name it.
And of course, all the institutions that sign on, and Claire's got some of them. The other one that occurred to me, I think this was in the second report, and I think our members will really enjoy this. Of course, who remembers Behind the News? It's been around for so long. There'll be very few of us who haven't come through a system where you troop into a primary school classroom. When I did it, there was only one TV in the whole school, so we had to go to that room. And Behind the News would supposedly inform children about education, inform them about key issues. The one that you found, or Colleen found in that second report, to have something on climate change, it literally, the title of the episode was Global Boiling. They picked up the phrase from Antonio Guterres from the United Nations, who is an actual communist, and invented that phrase global boiling, and it was reported by the ABC as fact in a program designed for children.
And more than that, after this program, which for those who don't know, I mean, they're about kind of 15-minute episodes. They're short episodes aimed to put current news and affairs into child language, I suppose. We can still question why that needs to happen anyway. But this was the one I talked about where there was just images of literally just fires and kind of hell-like scenes with this operatic music. And at the end of that episode, this friendly kid voice comes over and says, if you're experiencing any distress because of this episode, you should talk to an adult. So they've literally recognised that we're probably causing distress in kids right now, and we'll just put this little disclaimer at the end.
They know what they're doing. They know they're doing it.
So, Bella, as I do believe you have provided a lot of hope, and we are part of a movement that is pushing back. And one of the advantages that we have on our side is that the radical left believes that humans are infinitely malleable. As Claire said, they do want to find the children early, but they really do believe that they are just blank slates who can be created as the new man. But there is something more to humans, and that is really the limit of what they can actually do. And when I think about, say, gender theory, and this is what children are actually working out for themselves. Maybe not when they're 6 and 7, but later on in their school life, and certainly by the time they escape the school system.
Yeah, look, of course, they're not infinitely malleable, and they're not machines, and they're not products of a system, and they're not economic units, which is how we are treated by the state. There is never a mention in the national curriculum of anything other than the material, if I can put it that way. There's never any sense of telling someone that you have potential, because they are not interested in that person fulfilling their potential. That they don't think of these children as having souls or consciences. They just see them as putty to form in a way that they think that person should be. We need to get back to that, and we need to rebel against. We need to reject that, because that's the problem.
And Claire, you've actually it's slightly off topic perhaps for this evening, but you also in talking about what you've seen in clinical practice, with gender theory, you've also seen this collision between the extreme version of gender theory and and reality. And at the IPA, we like reality. We're quite wedded to it, I think, most of the people in this room. So,
And it's like you said before, it's all about language in a very, of course, Orwellian way, because if you control language, then you control people. And the language that children and teenagers present with is all this weaponized language in front of me. And there's lots of parallels with these different topics. The language is the same. Even today I was speaking with colleagues about the similarity in language with the gender distress that children are presenting with. And by the way, I've said multiple times that the gender medicine movement and what we have done to children in the name of medicine will be the biggest medical scandal of hundreds of years. It will be absolutely the biggest medical scandal ever, that we are allowing people to cut off body parts in the names of making them well. Similar language now in what we call neuroaffirming neurodiversity movements, that the patient has become the clinician. Patients no longer present to mental health professionals asking them what's wrong with them. I have these symptoms, I'd like to know what's wrong. They come with the diagnosis, and increasingly we are in a position where our job is just to agree and validate, because your lived experience trumps my years of training. It's all about the lived experience and the individual truth, not the actual truth. And so increasingly, as I said, the patient has become the clinician, and we're made redundant on being kind of forced into these narratives. And if I question that, just questioning things is framed as not just offending someone, but by doing harm to someone. So it's all about language, and people tying themselves in knots really over that.
Indeed, and your role, and we won't digress too much tonight, but the role of healthcare practitioners is increasingly just sign the certificate so that we can then access a range of material benefits, and certainly the psychic benefits that go with a culture that believes in that victimhood is in itself a moral virtue. So there are a range of psychic and material benefits that go with that diagnosis, and that's why they're demanding it. But Bella, again, reflecting on your experience over the journey, and you've been through this whole business of. I remember when you first started talking about critical race theory in the curriculum, and they were told, "Oh, you won't find that phrase anywhere in the national curriculum." Bella Debrera, she might have gone to Cambridge, she might have a PhD, she might have actually read the stuff, but she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just engaging in the culture wars.
Oh, that old political trick.
Yeah, and still it goes on. So Anthony Albanese was asked about Giggle v Tickle, and whether he thought they needed to have a look at the Sex Discrimination Act, and he said, "I'm not going to get involved in the culture wars."
All he's been doing for his entire life is waging the culture war. That's all he's been doing. There's his whole focus. And then suddenly, when we call him out on it, he says that the Conservatives, that we've started the culture war. It's the oldest trick in the book.
But it's been a very effective one, hasn't it? So you, during the period of the last Liberal government, attempted, most particularly in the context of the development of version 9 of the national curriculum, and let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 weren't that good either, but 9 was making it worse. But we had a Liberal government in charge. Now, why weren't they fighting the culture wars?
Well, I can tell you why, because I met with the then Education Minister at least 3 or 4 times and had very long conversations. Am I allowed to name and shame? Please. Alan Tudge, who, to his credit, understood the problem, agreed with me. We'd have very interesting and agreeable conversations for the hour. But at the end of the hour, he'd say, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it because of the bureaucrats."
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's very important. So I talked about it's top down and bottom up, and top down is not just, it'd be nice if they identified the problem and promised to do something about it, but there will also need to be strategies for radical change.
There was just such a lack of courage. I think that's the thing. Who cares if you're called a racist it doesn't matter. These names mean nothing now. It means nothing.
You just tell the SBS reporter that she's going to lose the job. But that's what you do. You're just
going to lose your job. Oh, well, Alan, you're going to lose your job.
Yes, and that's a very good point, Bella, that I'm meant to be asking questions, but I will just hand out elephant stamps as well. We're talking about schooling. That is so true that if you're going to be called a racist anyway, which is what we saw in the Voice to Parliament.
They're going to call you these names anyway.
So in for a penny, in for a pound. Be a true anti-racist and believe that all Australians are equal and all children deserve a decent education rather than indoctrination. There is a truly positive agenda there. We are coming towards the end of this panel discussion, and Bella, this is our final discussion. What have you learned along the way? You've talked to, I think, probably over 1,000 IPA members as you've moved around the country, and a lot of feedback on the book. What's your general reflections on where we are now?
I hadn't realised how much the book was needed, and I'm starting to realise that now. Even when I was writing it, I thought, I wonder if anyone's going to read this. And I wonder if it's any good. But I've realised from talking to so many people now that it's just something that needed to be written, as Claire mentioned, and that people are desperate to understand why it's happened, who's doing it, and what we can do to win. So it's been wonderful.
It certainly has. I mean, it's been inspirational. For me, trailing along, throwing my coat over the puddles as you approach them, and seeing the impact that you're having. And I mean, the other thing that you're involved in, and Colleen's involved in, and Claire, is these networks of parents and teachers. And perhaps I'll just ask Claire to reflect on, this movement that is building.
Yeah, I think coming back to just pick up on what Bella said previously about the way that things are named. I think that there's, parents are busy. I'm a parent. Parents are busy. You should be able to drop your child to a state-run school and not have to read the curriculum like Bella has done. You should be able to do that. And so maybe it's the busyness, or maybe it's the Australian she'll be right attitude, because up until very recently, I've just been met with a lot of parents saying, it can't be that bad, Claire. Like, it's about inclusion. It's anti-racism. It's about sustainability. Like, that sounds okay. Like, it can't be that bad. But just giving, you don't need to push hard in order for parents to go, what? They're doing what? So if you just show them a worksheet or an example, suddenly parents are very interested, and they are, and there's growing networks of parents out there who are demanding of their schools to tell them what they're teaching, to show them the worksheets, show them what videos they're showing, and that's how we're going to do it. But as I said, the first step is actually letting parents know what's going on, and this book will do that.
No, here. And if that means for some of the people in the room that were the parents in question are actually your children who have their children, then this is a book that those time-poor parents do need to read, and also some of Claire's work. What we might do, we might remain on the stage, I think, in the interest of time, and just invite Kenneth to the lectern. But in the meantime, please thank Claire and Bella for that wonderful discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Scott and Bella, for inviting me here tonight to address everyone, talk a little bit about my school, and also to offer a vote of thanks. Tonight, we've heard a lot about what is going wrong. A couple of weeks ago, after Bella graciously sent me a copy of Mindless to read, I did email her and say I had to admit it was a little bit of a depressing read. And I'm sure you can understand why. But that, of course, does not at all take away from its immense importance. In fact, it proves its immense importance. This is the truth that desperately needs to be told, and I'm so grateful to Bella, as indeed we all should be, for spending so much time in the weeds, digging into the current situation to reveal to Australia what has been happening and what is taking place in our schools right now. Please thank you again, Bella. And as the panel has just been talking about, this is a story that needs to be told because the majority of Australian parents are simply oblivious to it. Sure, they may be aware that children are being taught about respect for differences and tolerance and embracing diversity, which, depending on how they're defined, are good things. But the devil is, of course, in the detail. And it is all about the details that the parents are unaware. For too long, families have bought what they've been sold by governments of all stripes, that the state should be solely responsible for education. But there's a growing awareness. Thanks to books like Bella's, the work of the IPA, but also in a strange twist of providence, thanks to COVID. The learning from home that was supposed to be taking place during the lockdowns 5 years ago pulled back the curtains, revealing what was actually happening in classrooms. And this, combined with other things such as the work of Jonathan Haidt that led to a national conversation about social media, has started to revivify parental responsibility for education. As a result of that, while it's early days, across Australia there is a burgeoning movement to redeem education. As has been mentioned, I'm the principal of a small independent Catholic school that exists primarily because there were enough parents across Brisbane that demanded something different. St John Henry Newman College opened this year, and we have 46 students from prep to year 3. And that might seem like a small cohort, but opening a completely independent school, unaffiliated with any larger organisation, and therefore without any institutional financial backing, is very difficult and very rare. And 46 is actually a very strong start. But the bigger news, thank you. The bigger news, though, is that the prep intake for every year from 2027 through to 2030 has more applications than we have room for. For prep next year, we have had so far 38 applications and only 24 spots. And it's this same in all future years for which children have up to this point been born. I do have applications from women who are pregnant. So why are parents so keen on what we're doing at Newman College? Why are they driving to Tarragindi through traffic from over an hour away, from Ormeau and Raceview and Tingalpa, passing dozens of schools on the way, some schools that are closing down because they don't have enough enrolments? I would suggest that it is simply because we're doing what used to be the standard approach to education. We teach great literature. Our students this year are reading The Wind in the Willows, Tales of King Arthur, and children's versions of the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Shakespeare. We teach real world history, starting with ancient Israel and Egypt in year 1, and then on to Greece and Rome, the medieval world, the Renaissance and modernity, so that by the time they have finished primary school, our students have been filled with knowledge of the stories of how our world and our nation has been shaped by Western civilization. We only know who we are when we know our history. It's the collective memory of a society, and we disconnect our children from their identity when we ignore or denigrate this history. Our society is obsessed with attention. We're constantly swamped with competing attacks on it, usually in the form of mind-numbing distraction. But it is attention that truly matters. This is why we're low-tech, because screens deaden the intellect and blunt our capacity to attend properly. Instead, we spend a lot of our time outside doing nature studies, spending time really attending to reality like leaves or insects, and then teaching the students how to sketch them. And this training of attention helps us to teach real grammar. Grammar is the structure of language, and through language we make sense of our world. I'm convinced that a lack of proper grammar education, coupled with stunted vocabularies from either reading nothing or only reading trash, plays a big part in the meaning crisis that has beset the West and in particular our young people. Without the words to express our deepest feelings and without the grammar to comprehend the structure of these feelings and thoughts, we're left impotent to explain not only to others but even to ourselves what we truly think. And thus logical thinking in harmony with reality is in rapid decline. We also let children be children, and I love listening to Clare talk about the importance of that tonight. We respect their dignity as children. We have long break times during which children are free to play imaginatively with whatever they find around the school site. And this has meant making rivers and dams in the rain and making elaborate structures out of sticks, the biggest of which could fit 10 students and had multiple rooms. And all of this was done cooperatively without any direction or interference from teachers. There are disagreements, of course, but even then we don't step in and solve these problems for the children. It's a vital part of growing up and forming character. We simplify where we can, choosing depth of knowledge of things that matter over a surface level breadth of a lot of things that don't. In short, St John Henry Newman College is, I think, just offering the kind of education that most parents actually assume is happening in their schools. But they are, of course, sadly mistaken, as Bella's book so brilliantly points out. Our focus at Newman College is on cultivating wisdom and virtue. G.K. Chesterton said that education is simply the soul of a society as it passes from one generation to another. If this is true, the state of our education system tells us some dark truths about the state of our soul of our society. As Bella writes in the book, which you absolutely have to buy, the struggle for young minds is ultimately the struggle for the soul of our civilization. Newman College answers the question of what education is all about, of what kind of young people we're trying to form by respecting the past, by honouring the tradition and patrimony that has been passed down through Western civilization, rather than inventing new values or only valuing what is new. We introduce students to the best that has been thought and said, and the stories and ideas that have stood the test of time. Bella's book has revealed the problem. It is deep, and it is stark, and it is serious. If you have children or grandchildren in school, you need to read this book. If you know parents with kids in school, they need to read this book. And once we've read it, the next question is what to do about it. Bella gives us reason to hope in her conclusion. As she writes, the architects of our new ideological education assumed that once indoctrinated, the youngest generation would carry their project forward without question. Far from passively absorbing every ideological label, they are beginning to resist. Having been offered only disorder and insanity, they are now seeking order and sanity. St John Henry Newman College aims to be a model of what is truly possible, and we're proud to be a vanguard of this order and sanity. It's now my honour to offer a vote of thanks to Bella and Clare for all of the work that they have done and continue to do. Will you please thank them again?